Welcome back, everyone, to another chilling episode of Dark Highways. Tonight, I have a story that will make you think twice before driving alone at night. This is the disturbing tale of a trucker named Joe and his harrowing journey through a stretch of road known as Shadow Pass. Joe had been a trucker for over 20 years. He'd seen it all: thunderstorms, blizzards, even a tornado or two. Nothing could rattle him, or so he thought. One late autumn night, he was tasked with delivering a load of supplies to a small town nestled in the mountains, accessible only through Shadow Pass. As Joe entered the pass, the air grew colder, and a dense fog began to roll in, the kind of fog that seemed to swallow everything around it. Visibility dropped to nearly zero, and the once familiar hum of the engine now seemed like a sinister growl. Joe turned on his high beams and slowed to a crawl. The road twisted and turned, each bend hiding the unknown. Then, out of nowhere, he saw a figure standing in the middle of the road. He slammed on the brakes, his truck screeching to a halt just inches away. Heart pounding, Joe stared back at the figure. It was unlike anything he'd ever seen. Tall, gaunt, and with eyes that seemed to burn into his soul. Before Joe could react, the figure vanished into the fog. Determined to reach his destination, Joe pressed on. But the pass seemed to stretch on endlessly. The fog grew thicker, the cold more biting. And then, it happened again: another figure, this time off to the side of the road, watching him. Each time, the figures would appear and disappear, always just out of reach. Joe's mind raced. Were they ghosts, hallucinations, something worse? The radio crackled, and for a moment, he thought he heard whispers, faint, unintelligible, but unmistakably sinister. As the whispers grew louder, Joe's nerves began to fray. He was a seasoned trucker, but this was something beyond the natural world. The road ahead seemed endless, and he felt a growing sense of dread, like he was driving into the very heart of darkness. Just when he thought he couldn't take it anymore, the fog began to lift. The road leveled out, and the sinister figures vanished. Joe saw the lights of the small town ahead, a beacon of normalcy in the nightmarish landscape. Made it to the town, delivered his load, and took a moment to collect himself. But the experience haunted him. He'd driven through Shadow Pass countless times, but never had it been like that. The figures, the whispers, they stayed with him, a chilling reminder of that night. Joe never found out what those figures were, and he never drove through Shadow Pass again. Some say the pass is cursed, others believe it's a gateway to another realm. Whatever it is, one thing is certain: some roads are best left untraveled. Sam had been on the road for years, driving through some of the most isolated parts of the country. One night, he was hauling a load of electronics to a warehouse on the outskirts of a small town. The highway was empty, stretching endlessly into the darkness, with only the occasional distant glow of a farmhouse or streetligh. As the clock ticked past midnight, Sam began to feel the weight of the long hours on the road. He turned on the radio, hoping the music would keep him alert. But the only station he could find was playing an old, haunting melody that seemed to seep into his bones. Just as he was about to switch off the radio, he saw something that made his heart skip a beat. On the side of the road stood a woman, her figure barely visible in the dim light. She wore a long, white dress, and her hair hung loose around her shoulders. Against his better judgment, Sam pulled over. He rolled down his window and called out to her. She didn't respond, but slowly approached the truck, her movements almost ethereal. As she got closer, Sam noticed her eyes dark, hollow, and filled with a sorrow that seemed to reach out and grip his soul. She sat down without a word, and Sam, feeling an uneasy mix of pity and fear, asked where she was headed. In a voice barely above a whisper, she said she needed to get to the next town. Sam nodded and started driving, the silence in the cab growing heavier with each passing mile. As they drove, Sam couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The woman stared straight ahead, her expression blank, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The radio began to crackle, the haunting melody giving way to static, and then, to Sam's horror, to faint whispers. The whispers grew louder, filling the cab with a chilling sense of dread. Sam glanced at the woman, but she seemed oblivious, her eyes now closed. Suddenly, she spoke, her voice sharp and clear, cutting through the whispers. "You need to stop. Now!" Sam pulled over, his hands shaking. The woman turned to him, her eyes now piercing and filled with urgency. "You need to leave this place," she said. "It's not safe." Before Sam could respond, she opened the door and stepped out into the darkness. Sam watched her vanish into the shadows, his mind racing. He waited a few moments, hoping she would come back, but she never did. The whispers in the radio ceased, replaced by the eerie melody once again. Shaken, Sam drove on, his thoughts consumed by the mysterious encounter. When he finally reached the next town, he stopped at a diner, desperate for some semblance of normalcy. He recounted his story to the waitress, her face turning pale as he spoke. The waitress told him that the road he had traveled was known for strange occurrences. Many had reported seeing the ghostly figure of a woman, always appearing at the same spot, always vanishing without a trace. She was said to be the spirit of a young bride who had died in a tragic accident years ago, forever wandering in search of a way home. Sam never saw the woman again, but the memory of that night stayed with him. The phantom hitchhiker of that lonely highway remained an unsolved mystery, a chilling reminder that some roads are haunted by more than just memories. Mark was a seasoned driver, known for his fearlessness in the face of treacherous weather and winding roads. But nothing could have prepared him for what awaited him on that fateful night. He was hauling a shipment of medical supplies through the heart of Whispering Hollow, a shortcut known to locals but avoided by most. The air grew thick with an unnatural stillness as Mark navigated the narrow path, the towering trees casting long shadows that seemed to reach out for him. He glanced at his GPS, which flickered ominously before losing signal altogether. Alone in the darkness, he felt a chill crawl up his spine. Just when he thought he might be imagining things, he heard a soft, melodic whispering that seemed to come from all directions at once. The words were indistinct, yet carried a haunting familiarity that made his skin crawl. Mark gripped the steering wheel tighter, trying to focus on the road ahead. But the whispers persisted, weaving in and out of his thoughts like tendrils of mist. He glanced at his mirrors, half expecting to see something lurking just beyond the reach of his headlights. As he drove deeper into the hollow, the whispers intensified, their eerie cadence now accompanied by fleeting glimpses of movement in the periphery of his vision. Shadows darted between the trees, their forms shifting and twisting in ways that defied logic. The radio crackled to life, emitting a burst of static before settling into a faint broadcast of an old, mournful tune. Mark's pulse quickened as he recognized the melody. It was a song his grandmother used to sing, now twisted into a haunting lament that echoed through the cab. Unable to bear it any longer, Mark slammed his foot on the gas pedal, pushing his truck to its limits as he raced towards the end of Whispering Hollow. The road seemed to stretch endlessly, each turn revealing more shadows and whispers that threatened to consume him. Finally, he reached the other side, the whispers fading into the distance as he left the cursed road behind. He pulled over at a gas station, his hands still shaking as he recounted his harrowing journey to the attendant, who listened with wide-eyed horror. The attendant explained that Whispering Hollow was no ordinary row. It was said to be a place where the boundary between the living and the dead blurred, where lost souls whispered their regrets and warnings to those foolish enough to pass through. Mark never forgot his encounter with Whispering Hollow. Some say he still hears the faint echoes of those haunting whispers in his dreams, a reminder of the thin line between reality and the supernatural. Dave had been on the road for hours, driving through the flat, endless plains of the Midwest. He was hauling a load of produce to a market in a distant city, and as the night wore on, fatigue began to set in. Seeing a sign for a rest stop up ahead, He decided to pull over and catch a few hours of sleep. The rest stop appeared just as the sign had promised, a small, isolated area with a few parking spots, a restroom, and a couple of vending machines. Dave parked his truck, turned off the engine, and stepped out into the cool night air. As he made his way to the restroom, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The rest stop was eerily quiet, with no other vehicles or signs of life. The only sound was the soft rustling of leaves in the wind. Inside, the restroom was old but clean, a stark contrast to the unease he felt. Dave splashed some water on his face, trying to wake himself up. As he looked into the mirror, he thought he saw movement behind him, a lusty flicker, gone as quickly as it had appeared. Dismissing it as a trick of the light, Dave decided to get some rest. He walked back to his truck, climbed into the sleeper cab, and lay down, hoping to shake off the strange feeling and get some sleep. But sleep didn't come easily. Just as he was drifting off, he was jolted awake by a sharp knock on his window. Startled, he sat up and looked outside, but saw nothing. The rest stop was as deserted as ever. He opened the window and called out, but there was no response, only the echo of his voice in the still night. Unease settled over him like a heavy blanket. He locked the doors and lay back down, determined to get some rest. But the knocking returned, this time more insistent. He sat up again, his heart pounding. He knew he had to check, but every instinct screamed at him to stay inside. The rest stop was empty. No sign of anyone. No footprints. Nothing. Just the cold wind and the oppressive silence. As Dave turned to head back to his truck, he saw something that made his blood run cold. The rest stop sign, which had been illuminated when he arrived, was now dark and unreadable. Panic set in. Dave hurried back to his truck, his flashlight beam shaking with his fear. He climbed into the cab, locked the doors again, and started the engine. He needed to get out of there, fast. As he drove away, he glanced in his rearview mirror, expecting to see the rest stop receding into the distance, but it was gone. The parking lot, the restroom, the vending machines, everything had vanished, as if it had never been there. Dave never forgot that night. He asked around, tried to find anyone who knew about the rest stop, but no one did. It was as if it had never existed. Some say it was a ghostly apparition, a trap set by spirits lost on that lonely highway. Others believe it was a glitch in reality, a place where the normal rules didn't apply. Whatever it was, one thing is certain: some places are best left unvisited, especially in the dead of night. Thanks for tuning into Dark Highways. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more spine-chilling tales. And remember, sometimes the safest route is the one that avoids the unknown. Until next time, keep your eyes on the road and your mind on the present. Who knows what lies in the shadows?